Welcome back to Film Files. In today's file, we will be uncovering an Indian Hindi-language vigilante action film from 2015 titled Gabbar is Back. Sit back, and let's dive in. Professor Singh is a vigilante, and his secret identity is Gabbar. We see him on a computer profiling some names. The pictures on his computer are identities of supposedly corrupt officers of the law. One of these men is enjoying a night out at a playhouse when a random woman seduces him away from the crowd. Next thing you know, she pushes him into a waiting bus. Yet another officer is kidnapped at his home. One more is thrown off a train and then picked up by a waiting car. By the end of the night, up to 10 officers have been kidnapped by Gabbar's helpers. The next morning, it is all over the news as the law establishment goes into damage control or publicity mode. Before they can settle properly, they get a dispatch that 9 of the kidnapped officers have been released, but the 10th has been hanged in the public square to send a message literally. Meaning a file has been tied to his person as he hangs. It contains a recorded CD. Gabbar and those who work with him have also trouble making that same CD available publicly. Next, Gabbar is shown living out his civilian life as a physics professor. He is teaching his students the 5 types of forces. He calls up one of his students so he can practically demonstrate what he is getting at. Just then, some thugs come into campus and try to disrupt the learning atmosphere. They are telling students to leave the premises. Eventually, they try the same antics with the professor. He challenges them in a fight while still giving his lecture. He is using the thugs as an object lesson to demonstrate the type of forces there are and, at the same time, neutralize the threat that they pose. Their ringleader is outside the school gates and orders some thugs to destroy the campus gates. Professor Singh stops them with his superior fighting skills as if to school them to never mess with any institution of higher learning ever. He is on his way home that evening when a lady rushes into the road and stops him. She wants help conveying her pregnant friend to the hospital. They get into his car, but her water breaks as Singh drives. The lady then urges Professor Singh to stop right away. She wants to attempt to deliver the baby herself. Singh steps outside for a while and once the baby is born, he hands over his shirt to wrap the new baby in. They eventually get to the hospital, and he drops them off. He hangs around a little as the new mother is taken away. Then he simply disappears just as the lady who helped with the delivery looks for him in vain and admits he may have been an angel. A junior officer named Sadhu thinks he can crack the Gabbar case on the policy front. While his superiors are at a meeting, he tries to chip in his thoughts, but he is ignored and insulted for his troubles. He leaves and becomes determined to follow his leads on the case, but first, he applies for medical leave. Professor Singh, or is it Gabbar, is drinking some tea in a public place when another loyalist secretly passes some files to him. While there, he spots the girl from the night before who helped deliver the baby in his car. She has just scratched an older man's car with her scooter. She tries to defend herself by blaming the driver. Gabbar steps in at this point and catches her out. He is trying to help the wrongly accused driver, who he says will suffer much more than her if he loses his job. At least, she remembers Gabbar from the night before, and she introduces herself as Shruti. Gabbar records yet another audio CD warning the authorities that he is about to strike again. He even mentions the specific government department he will expose. This sends everyone into a confession frenzy because they don't want to be his next victim. So while everyone is distracted, Gabbar kidnaps his real target. He is the agriculture minister and Gabbar accuses him of being indirectly responsible for the suicides of some farmers who couldn't cope after he diverted the irrigation works to suit more wealthy investors. Gabbar ultimately hangs him publicly too. After which, he takes out time to attend the shower of the baby he helped deliver. He even gifts the baby his necklace. You can tell that he cherishes the new baby's life, as Shruti observes. Next, they are both on a coffee date. And as anticipated, the song and dance typical to Indian films are initiated. Shruti is singing about falling in love with support from some backup dancers. Separately, Sadhu is still seeking out his clues in another police jurisdiction. On one of their dates, Shruti is googling a world fact, and they both get up to leave. Shruti is not paying any attention and carelessly walks into the road. She barely misses being hit by a tricycle. So Gabbar has to take her to the hospital. While there, Gabbar discovers some corrupt dealings going on. It seems the hospital staff is involved in a racket to take people's money without actually helping them with their medical conditions. He is downstairs at the reception when a man has fully paid his medical bills and is told that his wife has died. How convenient. But Gabbar is resolved to expose this particular instance of corruption and sends Shruti home so he can assume his secret identity. He goes to a local morgue to acquire a body and meets a family mourning their dead husband and father. He takes the dead body to the same hospital and asks that the doctors treat him. The doctors admit the dead patient so they can milk Gabbar of some money. Gabbar wants to catch them out. But the doctors don't know this and so pretend they are ankle deep in trying to treat the patient who they know is already dead. 6 hours later, the doctors return and declare the patient dead. This is when Gabbar springs them. He tells them to pay some money to the bereaved widow, or he will expose them. The incident gets all the way to the hearing of the vice president of the hospital, who tries to call his much higher-ranked father. Irrespective of the payments, Gabbar still releases the footage online, and a crowd gathers outside the hospital as the vice president drives in. He pulls out a gun to disrupt the crowd, but in the ensuing struggle, he is killed. Next, we see his father storming the hospital. He calls himself Digvijay and admits he is influential enough to root out Gabbar and whatever he stands for. So first, they start to scour the security footage. Separately, Sadhu is trying to find the link between all the clues he gathered. He is at a barbershop when some students step in, and it suddenly occurs to him that his persons of interest might have all attended the same postgraduate university. Sadhu runs it by a female colleague who gets on the police computer and corroborates his theory. Meanwhile, Digvijay's footage search yields some results. The men with him are able to identify Gabbar from the footage. Digvijay even recognizes him as the man he killed a few years ago. Gabbar is at a wedding with Shruti, and while the ceremony goes on, he recalls his first love. As he sings, their life together is portrayed. But it comes to an end when some buildings in their neighborhood collapse, and Gabbar's love interest is killed along with many others. Digvijay's well-paid cronies are analyzing the fallout and complain that one man, in this case, Gabbar, is holding up progress because his wife and unborn child were killed in the collapse. Gabbar is let into the room, and Digvijay tries to bribe him, especially after Gabbar realizes the hopelessness of calling on any highly placed officials. They've all been bribed too. Now Gabbar can only resort to physically fighting those in the room. He even tosses Digvijay through the window and he almost falls to his death. But Gabbar shows some mercy and walks away. Digvijay then picks up an axe and hits Gabbar with it. It almost kills him. Back in the present, Gabbar starts another campaign to kidnap 10 more corrupt officers. The police force even sends in their best investigator to look into the Gabbar case. Even then, Gabbar is able to carry out the kidnaps under his watch. Shruti is riding her scooter at a traffic stop when she sees Gabbar in a police uniform. She is able to put 2 and 2 together to figure out something is off. She follows him and her curiosity leads her to a cemetery. Gabbar is there with some of his loyalists, and they have taken a top-ranking police officer hostage. His son also happens to be among Gabbar's group. Soon enough, Shruti is discovered and brought before Gabbar. She accuses him of kidnapping and murder. This is when he reveals himself as Gabbar. His helpers are the same medical students who revived him from the axe attack. She is surprised, but then she is made to appreciate the work he and his helpers are doing. The son of the corrupt officer accepts his father's fate, and this convinces Shruti of the importance of Gabbar's work. Back at the police office, the star investigator is cracking his brains on how to proceed. Then Sadhu steps in with some tea. When it seems the officers in the room have met a dead end in their investigations, he raises his voice to speak. As usual, his superiors try to shut him up, but the star investigator insists. Sadhu goes on to present his findings, and the star investigator is impressed. So the next stop is the National College, which is the main clue tying everything together. The students barricade the gates, but the officers still make some arrests. The students are then beaten and tortured, but still, none of them give away the true identity of Gabbar. Digvijay does his digging too, and to spite Gabbar's fight against corruption, he gathers some officials known for their honesty and kills one. The others are then compelled to sign some papers in Digvijay's favor. The police, on their part, are closing in on Gabbar. Sadhu suggests they start thinking like him. For instance, how Gabbar will make a move on Digvijay over the death of the honest official. It turns out Digvijay's birthday is coming up soon, so the police rally their resources for the event. And yet, on the day, Gabbar and his helpers successfully kidnap Digvijay right under everyone's noses. The next day, Shruti and another lawyer are at the police office and ask to see the detained students. Shruti tries to make a case for Gabbar and why he is a symbol of hope, especially to the battered students. Elsewhere, Gabbar has Digvijay and makes a wager with him. Essentially, Gabbar wants to know who the bigger brand is. So he gives Digvijay 3 chances now that the tables have been turned. It seems everyone is warier of being destroyed by Gabbar than they are of enriching themselves with bribe money. Then, Gabbar gets in a fistfight with Digvijay, ending in his death. Gabbar then gives himself up at the police station. He confesses in front of everyone. More significantly, he makes the news, and people come out in droves to support what he stood for. He will most likely be executed according to his crimes, but he doesn't mind. He is being conveyed to his execution when a large crowd blocks the motorcade. So to let peace reign, Gabbar is allowed to address the crowd, and he inspires them to continue the fight against corruption. He says his last farewell to Shruti at the jail and moves on to the gallows. The executioner pulls a bag over his head as Gabbar makes a final comment. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and hit that notification button to open more files like this.